The answer is 21% if you got it right. You ask the people in the community. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story here. In St. Lucia, where I've worked for almost 2 years, the number one problem, there are two number one problems in St. Lucia. They are childhood sexual abuse and unemployment. Those are the two biggest problems, and they're huge. About 5 years ago, that was not evident. Everyone knew it, but there was no demographic to prove it. And what was interesting is a consultant research firm from Jamaica actually went and did a study, and they're the ones who found documented proof that childhood sexual abuse was a number one problem. Why didn't it show in the demographics? Because no one was collecting that information. The police, the courts, nobody. And they weren't making it a priority because they didn't understand how real a problem it was. So when you ask the community, you get the real answers. Then you look for the demographics to support the real problems, because the demographics are not always going to reflect what's going on. Next question. How do you know you have a winning proposal? 36% of you got it right. It's innovative and all the criteria of the proposal and donor, and most bang for the buck. So most of you knew that. A proposal includes, there was a whole list of things. 81% of you knew it was all of them. Here's an important one. The final question. Most likely, who reviews and evaluates your proposal? Okay, 33% of you thought it's going to be seasoned professionals and sector professionals. And you were surprised to find out that that's not the answer. The answer is it's a committee of volunteers and a myriad of people selected for the task. Many of the people have no experience or knowledge of what you're writing about. They may not even know your community. So those are very important things to understand when you're writing a proposal, because you have to make it readable and understandable to a person who doesn't know what you're talking about. All right. Now is there any questions so far? Anyone have any concerns about what we just covered?
All clear so far.
Okay, good.
Good morning. Will we get back our individual answer to the questions? Will we eventually get back ours to see what we got wrong and right?
This is a pre-post test, so you will be taking this test again at the end of the 5 sessions in order to see how much of it you began to understand and retain.
No, why I asked that, I wanted to know what my individual score. That's what I was asking. So I know that they give a percentage of what the responses were, but I would want to know how much was my individual score to say, well, I got that when I started and I got this when I ended. So from that perspective, I was asking it. If we get
I understand you want that, but that would not be a good pre-post test evaluation. So you're going to have to wait until the end and take it again, and then you will have the answers that you truly know. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, where we ended yesterday was we were working on the components of a proposal. Could you bring that slide, that one up? Because we had been discussing the packaging and delivery and submission of the proposal. Okay, right there, good. All right, we had discussed packaging, delivery, and submission. But before we move on to the partners, I want to talk about accountability because that came up yesterday at the end. Accountability for submission. Someone has to be accountable for that submission because if it's not done by the deadline, your proposal is irrelevant. It's thrown out. It's not considered. It's not put into a second group, we'll look at later on. No, it's thrown out. You have to meet the deadline. So someone must be accountable for the submission of that proposal, whether it's in person, whether it's by email, or whether it's by online submission application. Someone must be responsible. And one of the ways that you do that is, first of all, if you do it online, you immediately should get back a response from the system that says it has been submitted. Okay? What you do is you send that email to the people in your project team, proposal team, and let them know immediately. Now you're covered. Everyone knows it was submitted. If it wasn't submitted on time, you will get a response from the system that says, we're not accepting this because it was late. You need to tell people that it was late. You need to share that immediately, because if people in authority and above you think that this has been submitted and that it's a very good proposal, they'll be looking to find out what the results were. And if you try to pretend that you just didn't realize it and that it just went through and you didn't get awarded that proposal, okay, what's going to happen is someone who's smart enough is going to say to you, we'd like to know how we assessed, what our evaluation is. And when you call the donor for the evaluation, there won't be one because you were late and it never got evaluated. So I say to you, make sure that you tell the correct authorities above you, whoever signed that proposal for it to be sent, whoever authorized it, they must know that it was submitted on time or it wasn't submitted on time. The ways you can do that is online, I just explained. If you do it by email, you ask for a confirmation, and the donor will send you a confirmation that you got it. But you also make sure that when you submit by email, that several other people are CC'd on that email so that they know it was submitted as well. If it's done manually, you receive a receipt from the donor when you hand it in. Now, another reason this is very important is if you contract a proposal writer, you want to make sure that it was actually submitted before you make the final payment to them for the work that they did. Are there any questions about that? No questions? Good. Let's go on next to partners and subcontractors to a proposal. You're going to need to have teaming agreements. Those are basically contracts of agreement of how you will work together. And the donor is going to want to see them with the proposal. The PowerPoint is going all over the place. Okay. If you need to recruit people because you don't have the necessary staff to do this project, you need some people with more experience or selected experience. Like maybe you don't have the top-notch monitoring and evaluation people, and you're going to have to hire them. You're going to have to put ads in immediately and look at your registry to find good people. to support the program. You don't always have them on staff already. And recruiting takes time. So you need to do that immediately when you decide to do the proposal. All right, now we're talking about the technical side of the proposal, what you actually write. It's very important to understand the font size, margins, type of paper, and number of pages. That's if you're doing it manually. And also if you're submitting by email. If they tell you a particular size and font, if they tell you what the margins are, you must have the font and margins, and you must adhere to the number of pages they tell you. If you don't, you are in violation of the rules of the proposal, and you will not be read. Your proposal will be thrown out. Now, when you're doing an online application, I suggest you write in a sentence into the first category area and copy and paste it into a Word document so you can see what the font and the size is. And then you let everyone on the team know that that's the font and size, and that's what they should be using when they're writing their pieces of the proposal. You don't want them to write it in some other font and size, because when they send it to you for final edit, when you try to put it into the online application, it won't fit. And it will change on them. And so you don't know what, and you at that point cannot figure out what needs to be cut or not cut. So those are important rules that you send to people immediately. Now, the components of the technical proposal involve background. We're going to get into this later on in another session. We're going to go into all of this and how you put these things together, the kind of information that you need for each one of these sections. But right now, the technical involves background, approach and methodology, which includes activities and timeline, and organizational management, which includes organizational chart. You have to start talking about who's going to manage this project internally. You may hire a project manager. You may determine a project manager, but the director of the program and the CFO of your program are ultimately responsible for oversight. And that has to be explained in terms of organizational management. Past experience. Your donors are going to want to know what your past experience is. Now, if you've never done a donor project before, you can narratively tell them some of your experience, but they want to see donor projects that you have been awarded, that you implemented, and that you successfully completed. If you don't have that history, that's when you look for partners. All right. Staffing. Staffing, consultants, people you expect to hire. You need to have their resumes, and they will have a form for you to use. You can't just use your own. And there will be page limits. Now, my resume, my CV, is 18 pages long. I can assure you that that's not what gets submitted when I'm put on a proposal. It's usually 2 or 3 pages, which means that I have to reduce down my stuff to 2 to 3 pages when I submit it, and then it's put into the form that the donor wants for submission. A Gantt chart or a log frame. Do not do these unless you are requested to do them. don't think that just because you're smart and you know that they go with proposals, not every donor wants to see them. So adding them does not help you. It actually takes away from your points. Any questions so far? No questions? Okay. The final part of a proposal is the cost. It includes your budget. It includes what they call section Ks or certifications. You're requested by the donor to certify certain things. They want to see those things and they want them to be legal copies or notarized. A 1420 is what USAID uses, but basically it's proof of salary. So you can't put people on a proposal who make $50,000 and then put them on your proposal to be paid $100,000. You have to prove that they are making the kind of money you're putting in your proposal, and you have to prove it by documentation. And then what they call a CLOC is when you have people, especially consultants that you're going to hire, you need them to sign a document, an agreement that they will only be on your proposal. They will not be on one of your competitors' proposals, because that can eliminate both you and your competitor. All right. Any questions so far? We're going to go more in detail on this whole thing in another session.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
As it relates to the award, could it be award in any area, or it has to be in the area that you are requesting proposal for?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Say that again.
Yeah, okay, you said, for example, on your CV, if they request any award, you mentioned something about awards, right?
With my CV?
No, you mentioned something that if they ask you for awards, you could.
Okay. History. Your prior history. Yes. Go ahead.
So I'm asking if that could be awards in any area of achievement, or it has to be in the area that you're requesting the proposal for.
Ideally, you have awarded projects in the area you're asking for, but you don't always. Okay, so if you're asked for 3 or 5 of them, you put the ones that most match what you're asking for first. So if you don't have any, just put what you have. Okay.
Okay.
Because what you're saying is, we have experience with donors, we know rules and regulations, but we are going to be trying something new. We're expanding our services and our demographics, but we can prove that we know how to do that.
Okay.
All right. So then your technical side is where you have to prove that you can actually do this new thing that you've never been awarded for before.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I'm gonna tell a little story here, a very short story. When I worked in Nigeria, I was working for a group of agricultural colleges, what they call polytechnics, throughout the country. And I had gone to Ocean State, and I was to do the training, a 5-day training. When I got there, there were 40 people sitting there for the training. I found out that no one in the Polytechnic had been paid for over 4 months. The country of Nigeria is the one who pays their salaries. They had not received any pay for 4 months. and 40 people were sitting in this class. It was a 5-day class. It went from 9 o'clock to 5 or 6 o'clock at night. There was only 1 hour off for lunch and prayer because I had a significant Muslim population. In the very first hour that I was doing the training, I had to explain to these people that their polytechnic was not prepared to go for grants as an organization. They did not have the organizational structure and documentation in place to go for grants. So what I explained to them was that the skills I was going to teach them were going to be useful for them in many different ways. Many of them are involved in nonprofits in the community, but almost all of them had departments and worked as heads of their departments. And each one of them was responsible for reporting and requesting a financial budget at the end of each fiscal year. I said, this will help you do that. A month later, the Polytechnic was actually closed down by the country of Nigeria for 4 months. Totally closed down. By the first of the year, they reopened. And the group that I had taught decided that they wanted to go for a group of research grants. Now, research grants through the TET fund did not require the college to have all those organizational documents that you would need to send to a donor. So they all sat down and did research grants. But because of this course, because I showed them how to work in teams, because this was a face-to-face training, they had never worked in teams before. Even within their own department, they had never done that. Everyone was responsible for their own job, and that was it. They learned to work as teams. They said, we want to do research grants. They all got together and they said, we're going to back each other up. They helped each other with editing. They made sure that all the criteria of the proposals was complete. They made sure that their projects integrated so that there was more bang for the buck. All right. Now, this college was 20 years old. In its history of 20 years, they had only had 2 research grants, 2 very small ones, that had been awarded. This group worked together and submitted 11 research grants. And they figured, yeah, maybe we'll get a couple. Every single one of those grants, all 11 were awarded. That's unheard of. No institution ever gets 11 grants from that fund on an annual basis. What was different too was that I had taught them strategic planning. And that year, they were requested for the very first time to submit a strategic plan with their proposal. And they knew how to do it. So strategic planning is something we're going to talk about in another session. But that was brought up the other day. And it's very important for you to understand what a strategic plan is and how easy it is to do it. Okay? So let us go now to the next slide. We're talking about RFP, RFA, and solicitation basics. Does anyone know what an RFP is?
Request for proposal.
Good. What is an RFA? Anyone know what an RFA is?
Request for appropriation.
Request for application.
Appropriation.
No, it's application. I mean, I'm sorry, it's application.
Okay.
That's the correct word. Now, why is it important for you to understand that RFA means request for application? Because that's what grant solicitations are called. All right. Competitive solicitations are called RFPs. The majority of people going for RFPs, organizations, are usually for profits and very, very large nonprofits. RFAs were, up until about 10 years ago, were only for nonprofits. They became, a lot of those grants became large grants. And when they became large grants, there was a huge lobbying effort worldwide so that for-profit organizations could also compete. They don't compete from a for-profit perspective. They compete from a nonprofit perspective without being nonprofits. So when you're looking at a very large grant, there's a grant right now called Racial Equality 2030. It is a foundation grant from the Kellogg and MacArthur Foundations. It is being issued worldwide. And from the questions and answers that have already been expressed and answered, it's very clear that there's a huge number of for-profits. There's a huge number of universities, hospitals, networks of hospitals, networks of affiliations that are going to apply for this. So I thought, wow, I don't have a shot. I'm going to forget this. But I listened to the questions and answers. And there is a request that small organizations like mine, who do not have the history of awarded grants, that I can submit an application and possibly get through the process and be selected for an award. And I am seriously contemplating it because I listened to all the questions and answers. And those questions and answers are not part of the proposal, the written proposal. If you're not listening to the questions and the pre-proposal, the pre-conferences that they put on, you're not going to get all the information you need. So before you do something, you have to be totally prepared before you move on. Okay.
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
Question. You said that RFP mean request for a proposal and RFA mean request for what?
Application.
Oh. And but one is the RFP is more competitive, but the RFA is less competitive.
No, it's not that it's less competitive. Application is normal for grants.
Oh.
Aha. That's the language of grants. RFP is the language for competitive solicitations.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Good. It's important because if you see an RFP, doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it. You just have to know that it's open to everyone. And RFA is more selective. Even though for-profits can apply, if you look at the criteria on the proposal, many times they will tell you exactly who can apply. Only those who are eligible can apply.
So if you are not eligible and you apply, they won't look at it.
No, don't bother applying. You have to meet the eligibility requirement. If it says only universities can apply, if you're not a university, don't apply. If it says only nonprofits that are registered legally and in the same value system as them, and also are they supporting the same kind of things that you do? Follow funders' directions. This includes eligibility. When you read a proposal, you have to do every single thing that they ask for in the way they ask you to do it. If they say you must have a mentor involved with your research, and they have to be an accredited professor of a university, then you need to have that, and you need a statement from that person saying they will mentor you and they can prove who they are. If you don't have that, don't apply. I don't care if you got a PhD yourself. Makes no difference. If it tells you you need something, you do it the way they want it. Now, this one is very important. Demonstrate your organization's strengths. All right? Not your organization's needs. When you write a proposal, you are not writing about what you need. You're writing about what a strong organization you are, how capable you are of doing the work you want to do. It is never about money. When you say, what do you need? And people say money, that is not the answer to anything. Because what you're saying is, I need money to buy or purchase or get what I need. Well, what is it that you need? And you have to state that. Money only comes up in a budget. You do not discuss money in the technical part of your proposal, ever. Okay. Are there any questions about that?
The question, but I'm just going to ask persons to mute their mic when they're not speaking because we're getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you.
One question. Suppose one of the problem is funding, and you're discussing that in your rationale, so that the reason why you're writing this particular project proposal is because there are lack of resources and funding. Would that be okay, or you don't discuss any money at all in
No, because it's not a lack of funding. It's a lack of the services that you want to provide. You don't have those services. True, you may not have the money to pay for those services, but the point is you don't have those services in place. That's what you're requesting. And then in your budget, you're going to explain how much those services are going to cost.
Okay, I understand. I understand.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Good.
Just to follow up on that, in terms of what I understand is oftentimes it is going to be the lack of funding that is the issue, but what is the funding for? So you're not stating that you're short of the money, but you're short of the money because of this. So what is the because? So if it is that you wanted to get uniforms for your staff, you need to say, oh, you don't need money, you actually need uniforms for your staff. So you're saying, what is it, the actual things that you need the finances for, your actual needs?
Right. You're right. We need uniforms because our volunteers and staff are out in the community, and they need to be recognized by people in the community so that they will allow people to come and help them. But without those uniforms, I don't know who's coming to my house, and I don't want you in my house when you say you're going to help me. But if you have a uniform on, I know you're from a particular organization, and I welcome you into my house because I know you can help me. So that's the reason you want the uniforms.
Just to make sure I heard what you said correctly, you said the proposal should demonstrate your strength, right? Not your
Yes.
need.
Right.
Okay.
Why can you know, why are you the one proposing this? Because you believe you can do it. And you believe you're
Okay.
the best person to do it. You're the best organization to do it. So why are you the best organization?
Okay, fine.
Okay, good. All right. When you talk about the needs, well, we want to serve people and we know what they need. Well, you don't know what they need unless they told you what they need. Okay? How do you document that they told you what they need? Oh, well, we did some research and the demographics say, well, the people didn't say. When you do a community mapping, okay, can we bring up the slide for community mapping? Okay, community mapping. I discussed this yesterday, the day before, and someone asked me, what is community mapping? Will we talk about it? Okay. Community mapping can be as difficult as you want it to be, or it can be very easy. If you want to Google community mapping, you will find all kinds of manuals and toolkits to do this. And you can make your life miserable, and you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money doing a community mapping. The objective of a community mapping is literally to examine the community assets and needs. Well, people say, well, that's a needs assessment. A needs assessment is normally done to a targeted group of people. When you do community mapping, you want it to be as inclusive of the community as possible. All right. Well, one of the ways that I suggest people do it is the organization take the lead role and then get groups of people in the community to do the community mapping. So you might get a group of men, a group of women, a group of youth, and ask them to map the community. In other words, with magic markers, pencils, crayons, and a big piece of paper, tell me what your community has. What's it look like? Where are the parks? Where's the hospital? Where are the roads? Where are the bridges? Where are the water supplies? Where are all those things? Now, men see a community in a certain way, women see it a certain way, and youth see it a different way. So when you have all three maps and you combine them, you have a really good perspective of what's in that community. All right. Make sure there's people with disabilities and elderly and young children to be part of it. Maybe they can be at the end when they look at the map and see there are things that they need. What you'll end up doing is having a big public meeting, and everyone will be observing this community map. And you'll do a brainstorming session with a large group of your public. Tell us what the problems are. And you just start writing them all down. There's no wrong answer. At the end of the session, you have people go up and mark their top 5. Then you take the top 5 and you have people vote on them, and you have the top 3. And then you do a strategic plan on all 3. And that's what your proposal should be based on. Okay? What I'm getting at here is that proposal writing is about planning and writing. 80% of it is planning. Only 20% is writing. You don't start writing until you have all the other pieces in place. All right. Any questions so far?
Does it really matter who will get to do the research part, or does it matter?
Who does the research?
Yeah, does it matter who will get to do the research?
Well, I mean, you can do your own research. There's no question about that. You can have someone else do it for you. But
Okay.
the research has to support what you're saying you want to do.
Okay.
All right. And if the research isn't there and your community is saying it's a problem, then that's the reason for your proposal.
Okay.
Because no one's recognizing it. And here's the information. Our people are saying that this is a problem and there's nothing to support it. So we want to do something. But the only way you can document that is because you've done the community mapping and you've done the brainstorming, you've done the strategic plan. So now you have your own documentation. That answer it?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What if what you want to do is something innovative, or it represents a need for the community that you have garnered and seen? And so in essence, it's going to be something new to the community. So you wouldn't necessarily have gotten perhaps the community buy-in. It's just that you see that this is a need and this is going to benefit the community tremendously. How do you approach that? You would yes, let me hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. If you're going for a small seed grant to see if this innovation is a good thing, I would say you have a shot at that kind of a grant if it's a seed grant. And seed grants are very small. They're usually between $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 tops. If you have an innovative idea, you are not alone in this world. There are people who have the same innovative idea, especially if it's a good one. So your job then is to find other people in your community who have that same thinking. And then try to get support for it. And the way you get support is through public meetings. Bring together community leadership, make your presentation, make your argument, and then try to get support. And you're going to have that whole process then is how you document the need for that innovative idea. But you alone cannot have an innovative idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Can we go to the slide that says, does your organization have information, experience, and talent? Next slide. Okay. Does your organization, no, this isn't it. Okay. This is important. The question is, does your organization have the information, experience, and talent you need to successfully apply for and manage grants. When you determine that you are ready to write a grant and compete in the grant world with donors, or to seek funding from corporations and individual donors, you need to have certain things in place. One, you need to have a nonprofit registration with your government. Very important. It's got to be a legitimate piece of paper registered with your government, and you have to have a number. Two, your organization must have bylaws and a constitution. Sometimes you only need one or the other. But a good constitution